wanted to start off, Claes, and ask you, does playing an irredeemable bastard seem as liberating as it feels? Or
Yes.
what is it? What's it like playing a complete and total dickhead?
Well, the answer to your first question is yes, and it feels really good. I don't know what it is, but there is this sort of perverse joy of, getting to be a real arsehole. Yeah. But it's also like, it's good fun to play around with. And especially, I think, it's also to do not just with the characters, it's also to do with the scenes, all the scenes that we had. I think we found great joy and great fun in getting them to work. There's a reason why you call it playing, because it really is playing around, isn't it? So yeah, it is good fun, and I'm not going to try and go into why I'm probably just weird. I don't know. I think other actors are the same.
Oh, absolutely, because when you play baddies, they're the ones you never know what they're going to do. The hero always does the same thing, but if you play someone with a dark streak, they could go anywhere. So it's much more fun, much more rock and roll.
Yeah. But do you find, AnneMarie, playing, your character, she's so, obviously, the relationship is a product of, coercive control and everything like that, and the idea of, this man dominates every part of her life. You going into that, obviously I can imagine that's a challenge to try to present that in a way that you have some sort of agency, but I'm just wondering, carrying that around with you on your shoulders, what was that like? It must have been fucking awful, was it? Or, how was it like?
That's always the sort of quest for the kingdom, is when you're playing a character, is to try and protect yourself.
Yeah.
But inevitably, you're doing an 8-month shoot. It does seep in. It just does. And so you can find yourself just feeling a bit blue. And then you remember, oh, of course I am, because every day this is what I'm... Because your body doesn't know it's a lie.
Yeah.
It never knows it's a lie. And so it does have a huge effect on you. But then at the same time, you remind yourself that there's a point to telling these stories, and you try and, give yourself a wake-up call and say, but it isn't you. And somebody told me this great technique once where you have to write who you are and then all the things that you're not in your character, and it keeps you sane. So it can be quite useful,
Interesting.
Yeah. Because I remember, I think it was Emma Thompson was talking about it, that actors that have a theatrical background, and I know both of you have done theatre, but when you're waiting in the wings, you're not the character, you're yourself, and then as soon as you go on stage, right, it's bam, you're now this character. Do you separate that entirely, or do you, I suppose as you say, you carry it around with you, especially if you're doing it for 8 months?
I think there's a couple of things, isn't it? It's not so much of a switch when you're in the wings. There's a kind of creeping in. It's like the tide is coming in and you feel it happening. But also, there's a really interesting book on acting that David Mamet wrote, and he does write that that's what you should do. You should wipe your feet as you leave the theatre. That's the ideal scenario. But I think if you're trying to be as honest as you can and to mine something, and for the audience to buy you being authentically that person, you do kind of have to live in the corners a bit. It cannot help but get into the bones of you, But you get better at protecting yourself. When you're young, you think, oh, of course I should be feeling this pain. You love the masochism of it. But then as the years go by, you realise life's too short.
Kind of got on with it. Do you find, and this is a question for both of you, talking about switches, I don't know why I keep talking about switches, but when a scene calls for comedy or if a scene calls for drama, does a light go on in your head and think, okay, time to be, time to be funny, time to be whatever? But with something like this, where it's sort of the two intermingle quite well, I think, and I'm wondering, do comedic scenes, do they come easier to you? Do dramatic scenes come easier to you? Or do you make any distinction between the two?
I don't make any distinction at all. I don't ever think of a scene as something that is either that or that. I go for what is in there and try and just make everything you can of that situation. For instance, if it's of you and me, it's like getting to the core of what is in there. And we talked about the scene earlier, that the one where I come into the room and I ask you, can you just wear these shoes around the house and break them in for me? And it's like, you don't fucking have to put any comedy into that because it's in the lines. I mean, just to ask your wife to do that, if you actually try and do it funny, it's going to be cheese on cheese. And you don't want that. So I think it's really important to just be as true and have the situation really just become as true as it possibly can. And if it's a fun situation, it will be funny. And if it's a dramatic or drama kind of thing, it'll be dramatic. And if it's both, it'll be both. But I think if you go in there to do drama or to do fun, you're going to get it wrong.
Yeah, because we aren't playing comedy characters. You know, the circumstances and the events are funny. Look at something like Curb Your Enthusiasm. The whole hilarity of that show is what happens in each episode, you know.
Yeah.
And I think that's it. And that's what's clever about Sharon too, right? You know, she writes so brilliantly emotional truth and at the same time these hysterical scenarios that people find themselves inside of, but that can then be desperately sad or moving, you know. So that's what the slalom is in this show, really, isn't it? Is to go from there to there. But the only way to do that is to be truthful, I think.
Yeah. And I mean, like, I suppose the thing of it is that, like, everyone else is laughing, but you, the characters, you don't get to laugh. You're fucking living it, like, so it can't be funny to you.
Yeah.
Please, what is Danish humour like? Is it black? Is it what is Danish humour like? And I've just totally put you on the spot now.
I don't. We don't think we have one.
That's a lie. He's very funny.
Listen, I don't. I actually, if there's a difference between British humour and Danish, I couldn't tell the difference. I don't know what would define British humour?
Well, as opposed to Irish humour, you mean?
Is that different? Irish and British, would you say?
Yeah.
Is it?
I would, because I've seen both in my life.
Okay, so what was the difference?
Well, I mean, AnneMaries, I'll let you do it. I mean, you're a daughter of England, but a daughter of Ireland as well.
Yeah.
So.
I suppose I'd say that the British sense of humour is very self-deprecating, isn't it? You know, that's the kind of thing that you do. Like Four Weddings and a Funeral, it's all about that, isn't it? The lead character does that. Whereas Irish humour is more like that. You know, there's been more crack to be had in what's going on and people and, you know, does that make sense, do you think?
Yeah. I mean, I think it's, I think, and again, I suppose all humour is this, but like, I think our humour is quite black. And I think that's why I like Bad Sisters so much, because it's very Irish and it's very black and it's very,
yeah.
I know, like, Eastern European humour is very kind of big, long stories, and it has some horrible ending, but they all seem to kind of laugh, like, which, I don't know.
Which sounds a bit like this story. Very, very long, has a horrible ending, and everybody's laughing.
Based on a Belgian series, wasn't it?
Yes, that's right. It was.
Yeah.
It was. I think it's very different. I think it was seen as a sort of point of inspiration. So it's a similar story, but it's not the same. Sharon footed around with it, made some better choices, changed a few things, certain characteristics of people, you know, that kind of thing. I think it was a bit broader.
Actually, on that, like, having Sharon on set, I mean, the fact that she developed it and wrote it and did everything, I mean, was she any kind of a resource to you? I mean, did she give you any kind of, like, sort of tips on what the character was in her mind when she was writing it, or what was all that like?
Yeah, absolutely. And also then if something wasn't working, of course, she was there then to help shift it, change it. But yeah, it was extraordinary to have, because she's such a powerhouse, you know. She was showrunner, writer, playing one of the leads. So her presence was very much influential, you know. So it was fantastic having her there.
Did she give you, I mean, what was, I suppose, the recurring, or did she give you any kind of recurring note for your characters? And this is for both of you.
Interesting question. Maybe it's tricky for me to answer that one.
Well, you'd be giving stuff away, would you?
Maybe, baby.
Sort of, what do you mean, I mean, would she always be, what do you mean, recurring?
I suppose, like, as in, just play him more like a bastard, play him less like a bastard.
Oh,
that kind of thing.
I can't recall anything like that.
No, I think she just would be the thing you'd imagine somebody would want from their show, just remembering the...
It'd be more like, I mean, someone you could, I mean, if I think mainly it wouldn't be like that, play him more like that or do that. It'd be more like if there was something that we had, like, if there was something in there that we couldn't quite make work, then you could always go and we could have a talk about it. But she would never be like doing more like that or do, I don't... And that would have been super bloody annoying if she'd done that.
So, I think so. I mean, I'm not trying to run the post there, but I would think that would be annoying. Yeah.
That'd been but then it's also like, I mean, because there is also a director there, so it's really a balance of her also understanding that, you know, there's a director that is doing the directing and she. So I think at that point when we're there on set, she's more like the showrunner and the supervisor, and then there's a director sort of doing the other bits, because otherwise it starts to get really messy.
Final question, and I've only got I have a minute to get through this. I note that in the first episode, there's a very funny scene with the grave when the coffin has been lowered into the ground, and it cracked me up. I'm wondering, do either of you have any kind of anecdotes of a similar nature where something terrible happened at a very, very serious moment or a very kind of somber moment?
Well, I'm always hoping for something like that to happen when and fearing it at the same time. It's never happened. I've never been at a funeral where something like that. I mean, I was at a funeral like 3 weeks ago. I was carrying the coffin, and I'm always like, oh, fuck, what if it's slippery? Or what if, I mean, if you have ever carried a coffin, you will know that if you are of different heights, it's very, very, it can become grueling.
And you're a tall man.
And I'm quite tall, and then I do this, and then there's someone else who's like trying to, and that can be weird. Yeah. That didn't happen on this occasion either. So but it's also like, it's the same perverse little joy inside you that wants to play this character that also feel like, oh, what if something went horribly wrong? And you don't really want it to, but still it's also like...
But it's true, isn't it? It's like you want to be at the wedding where when they say, if anyone here knows of any reason, you want to be at the wedding where somebody jumps up
where
like The Graduate.
Says, yes, I have something to say on that.
We do, we really want it, don't we? Love the jeopardy of it. Yeah. And that's comedy, isn't it? It's all about jeopardy.
That's comedy, yeah. Right, I'm getting the wrap there. Thanks a lot.
Thank you.
Nice to meet you. Thanks, love.
All the best.
Bye.
Let us give thanks for the joy he's spread his whole life long.
Everything bad that could have happened has happened. Except that.